Season 3 ended with the Red Wedding, and we really saw, if not the downfall of House Stark at its nadir, and the Lannisters at their peak. And the melting down of ice seemed to us one of the symbolic moments that really showed the Lannisters taking power for themselves. And you know, it's very evocative. We really wanted an opening that was word-free, you know, just let the images tell the story. And it seemed to us that it could be something really beautiful to show on screen.
This is the sword that symbolizes the Stark family and the Stark family line, and melting it down to Tywin symbolizes his final victory, in ultimate ruthless victory over the Stark family, the kind of total obliteration of a family line that's immortalized in the Lannister family song, the Reigns of Castamere.
So this is just almost adding insult to injury that Tywin is melting down the sword, which has been a Stark cherished heirloom for generation after generation.
This act is an act that's going to travel, a story of Lannister power that gets propagated from person to person. So it actually is a very rational thing to do from Tywin's perspective. He shows that he understands how power works instinctively in a way that few men in this world do.
Tell your father I'm here. And tell him the Lannisters aren't the only ones who pay their debts.
It's a funny thing because Tyrion and Oberyn have a lot in common. I mean, they are both second sons. They're both out of the line of succession. Tyrion far more so than Oberyn, because Tyrion is, as he says himself, sort of a family embarrassment or family insult. They're very similar in many ways, including their feelings about the Lannister family, but Oberyn's hatred of Lannisters is much more pure than Tyrion's hatred of certain Lannisters could ever be. And he's driven by the white-hot anger beneath the affable, good time exterior. Oberyn is really driven by a kernel of rage and vengeance, which is, I think, what separates him from Tyrion.
You know, I think we're so used to the various schemers and plotters that have congregated in King's Landing near the throne, and now comes this guy who's really kind of willing to do almost anything at any moment, and that introduces an air of unpredictability. And the moment he hears that Oberyn's in town and not his older brother, Prince Tyrone, he gets quite nervous because Oberyn is notorious for being hot-headed, and it was a lot of fun for us. I mean, there was a character that we've been looking forward to introducing for quite some time.
I know him. The small one. His name is Polliver. He captured us and took us to Harrenhal.
Arya has undergone one of the most drastic transformations we've seen on the show, and the Arya that comes into this season is a very, very different person from the Arya we first met. And I think that she's sort of, at this point, an instrument of Stark vengeance in the world, and the instrument that she is going to use to see that vengeance through. It only makes sense that it would be Needle, which is one of the two Stark swords left in the world. And when she sees this sword on Polliver, of course she knows, you know, she has to have this instrument back and she needs to kill the man who took it from her. She understands how wonderful it is for her to finally, after so many years of having things done to her and to the people she loves, how gratifying it must be to finally be able to start doing it back to people. It was intentional that we would begin the episode with the loss of one Stark sword and what Tywin thinks is the death of the Stark line and legacy, and end it with finding another Stark sword and a kind of implied rebirth of that Stark ability to act in the world through Arya. Beginning of this season, we come upon Stannis having gone full Melisandre. He's definitely thrown in all of his bets with her, and he's burning people who refuse to acknowledge her god and her way of doing things. So I would say that what started as a practical thing for Stannis has become more than that.
He certainly has seen that Melisandre's power is real. You know, he's seen that she is capable of birthing a shadow demon that will eliminate, one of his enemies. He's seen that she's capable of throwing leeches in the fire, and in that way, apparently bumping off several more of his opponents. He's a very practical man. I don't think he cares so much about matters of theology. He just cares about winning this war and being installed as the king and sitting on the Iron Throne. And Melisandre seems to him his best chance. And if that means using black magic, so be it. If that means worshiping the Lord of Light, then so be it.
He wants his birthright, is obsessed with his birthright, and this is, as far as he can see it, the only way he's ever going to get what is coming to him. So he's now going to try things her way, and this is a pretty brutal, ugly way of letting everybody know where he stands on the Lord of Light front.
Hold on. Take me to the tree.
When Bran touches the weirwood tree, he gets a sort of a coming attraction of the full breadth and power of the sight that he has, and it's sort of telling him what's coming down the road for him once he truly masters this ability. Of course, he doesn't know what they all mean because they're all mixed and jumbled together. And every image in there does, it's there for a reason, and it does have some bearing on his story specifically and the story in general going forward.
There were certain key images that we really wanted to see, so whether it's a shot of Ned Stark in the black cells below the Red Keep in the time before his execution that Bran could not have seen, whether it's a shot of Bran falling, from a perspective he couldn't have seen it, or maybe the most crucial shot to us was the shadow of a dragon flying over King's Landing. And we don't know yet, is that from the past? Is it from the future? We'll find out, but it's not clear yet, and nor should it be clear to Bran. But the one thing that does make sense is that someone's trying to guide him, and that someone is opening his eyes to a very specific destination, and that's where he's going to find his destiny.
I know where we have to go.
The scene as a whole is one of the most challenging sequences we've ever done because it involves more of our principal characters than we've ever had together in the same place before, maybe more than we'll ever have together again.
With a show as huge as this one with so many different plot lines and different characters, it's kind of a rare opportunity. So we were really looking forward to that, to a chance to, what would Brienne and Cersei talk about if they ran into each other? And if Loras happened to bump into Jaime, literally, what would that conversation be like? And Oberyn and Cersei meeting, or Ellaria Sand and Cersei meeting, how would that go? So much of the wedding is a chance for that, which we always think is fun, to get characters who aren't normally joined together to see how they would interact.
And it's all playing out in real time, and it's a real testament to Alex Graves and Annette Helmick, his cinematographer, that they were able, it was a kind of a master class they gave us on how to shoot a big ensemble scene where everyone is in the right place at the right time, and everyone's actions make sense even when the cameras aren't on them. And obviously it's all centered around Joffrey since it's his wedding.
It's a real gift to anybody directing the show because obviously the stories are so complicated and intertwined, and now suddenly you're in a 30-page sequence where it's almost all going on with a large number of cast members for once, and they're not separate. And so I wanted to create a very tight flow so that people are seeing each other across the way, not seeing each other across the way, having their little beat and transitioning into other things.
That whole bit of the wedding, it's all what Joffrey wanted, and so it's in terrible taste, and everything's in terrible taste. It's just so funny to Joffrey and so completely unfunny to so many other people up there.
Uncle, how about you? I'm sure they have a spare costume.
We wanted very much to have the whole sequence leading up to Joffrey's demise tell us one last time exactly who Joffrey is. And it doesn't matter that this is his wedding and this is his day. I mean, everybody's king at their wedding for a day, and this is Joffrey's wedding. So he can do whatever he wants. Nobody can say a word about it. And he uses that power to try to humiliate his uncle in front of everybody who's anybody in Westeros.
The key thing for me in directing that part of the sequence is that you know Peter's going to be incredible at dealing with the situation he's in. You know that Jack is going to be beautifully evil. And my worry was that I steer it towards something really bad is going to happen. I don't understand what it is, but I know it's coming.
I said, kneel!
Look, the pie!
Marjorie was basically looking forward to a lifetime of trying to handle this guy and knowing full well this kid is a psychopath and that he's going to be doing a lot of bad things, and the best she can hope for is to control him a little bit. She certainly can't control him forever, but maybe she can kind of tamp down his baser instincts. You know, it's kind of a hopeless task. It's far too late for Joffrey. I mean, he's past the point of therapy. No one's going to make him into a good kid or a good king, but she's game. I mean, Marjorie is not fearful. She was willing to give it a go.
He's choking!
Calm the poor boy! Idiots, help your king!
Wait! Jack is such an incredible actor and young man, and is so lovable, and everybody's crazy about him that you just wanted to go, how great can we make this? And he, I think, had a great time and was fantastic in it.
I think between Jack and Lena, these are two not particularly pleasant people, but in the moment of his death, their characters sort of fall away, and he becomes just a terrified child who's looking to his mother for help, and she becomes the worst thing in the world anyone can imagine. There's a mother who's unable to help her son as he's dying in her arms, and they bring out the underlying humanity in these characters that I think in the hands of lesser actors could so easily turn into just evil stereotypes and could make Joffrey's death a purely triumphal moment for the audience, and I really don't think it is in the version of it that Jack and Lena have given us.
It was really fun filming all the different things that are going while he's dying, because it's so many different things, so many different places. But, you know, Sansa is pulled into her escape. Tyrion is wondering what's going on and assuming the goblet had something to do with it. Cersei is experiencing her child dying in front of her. Tywin is realizing that someone has taken out a hit on a family member in public. Oberyn seems to know a lot about poison, so is he a suspect? And we're really worried about everybody, give or take, and who had what part to play in it.
He poisoned my son, your king.
Traditionally, you know, the seasons are kind of slow builds, and the episodes towards the end obviously are the climactic ones, and the early episodes building up to them. And we thought it'd be fun to shake it up a little bit this time and have something very dramatic happen quite early. And also just knowing that we needed so much of the season to deal with the aftermath. It was an episode we've been looking forward to for a long time.
I don't think there's ever been an actor who has played a character less like himself than Jack Gleeson. He is the sweetest, loveliest, most excellent person you could ever want to know. So it's the joy in watching Joffrey die on screen, be that as it may for the people watching, the sadness that everybody on the production felt at the thought that Jack wasn't going to be on the show anymore was a real hit for everybody. It's a very difficult person for us to let go. He's been such a defining part of the show from the very, very first episode.
Your brother is dead. Do you know what that means?
It means I'll become king.
Tywin doesn't have a shred of sentimentality. It's all about what's best for the family.
Tywin picks up where they left off. I think on some level, Tywin realizes that it might not be the worst thing that ever happened to the Lannister family to have an unmanageable psychopath taken out of the equation and a very decent, tractable, respectful young man put into his place.
Now what's crucial for Tywin is that Tommen be a better king than Joffrey ever would have been. And Tommen is very young, so he's going to need some help. And as far as Tywin's concerned, there's no one better to give help than Tywin.
We have a man who starves himself to death, A man who lets his own brother murder him, and a man who thinks that winning and ruling are the same thing. What do they all lack?
Tywin is schooling Tommen, and in doing so, insulting Joffrey as a bad king and saying it right in front of his dead grandson's body and right in front of his daughter, who's standing there mourning her son.
Obviously, Cersei is not happy about this. Alina's performance in that scene, her silent performance during that part of the scene is one of my favorite performances in the episode.
I mean, the whole episode is kind of a series of inappropriate funeral scenes.
Jaime enters the scene, and then it becomes a very different scene.
Why have the gods made me love a hateful woman?
He's not saying he doesn't love her. He's saying that he wishes he loved somebody less hateful, but unfortunately, he loves her, and she happens to be his sister on top of it.
It becomes a really kind of horrifying scene because you see, obviously, Joffrey's body right there, and you see that Cersei is resisting this. She's saying no, and he's forcing himself on her. So it was a really uncomfortable scene and a tricky scene to shoot.
Diamond! Hide! Hide!
The wildlings have always seemed like a pretty rough group of people, and I think the Thens are the wildlings that the other wildlings consider a very rough group of people.
The other wildlings we've met are kind of like the Hells Angels. You know, they're tough, but you kind of figure if you were friends with them, they'd be fun guys to hang out with.
The Thens are pretty much the worst the wildlings have to offer.
The wildlings are not a single mass of people who have traditionally fought together. They're actually a congregation of tribes, most of whom have hated each other for generation after generation, and they've been killing each other as long as they've been killing men of the Night's Watch.
I'm going to eat them. Do you hear me? I'm going to eat your dead mama, and I'm going to eat your dead papa.
The Thens are probably the most feared of all these northern tribes. Even amongst the wildlings, who are pretty combative people, they're the most warlike of the tribes. They're given to cannibalism and scarring their faces, and you know, everything for them is fighting and warfare and killing.
You're the worst shit in the Seven Kingdoms!
It's plenty worse than me. I just understand the way things are. How many stars they got to behead before you figure it out?
Arya and the Hound are rubbing off on each other and are learning from each other whether they like it or not and growing closer together at the beginning of this episode, but this scene shows that there's still a big gulf between them.
Arya's toughened up quite a bit since her first days, and she was always kind of a tough kid, but she's seen so much horror that she's become inured to a lot of it. She still has a kind of native sense of fair play. You know, there are things that seem right to her and things that seem wrong, and that doesn't change. Even as nasty as Arya might get and as much of a killer as she might become, she still does have this kind of native sense of right and wrong that she learned from her father and her mother.
The Hound operates on a much more purely, ruthlessly pragmatic level. He's all about surviving, and as he points out, this farmer has money, and he's not going to have it for long because he can't defend himself, and people who are bigger than him and meaner than him are going to come and take that money from him. In the Hound's mind, letting this man keep his money is almost an immoral act in itself because somebody else is going to have it come winter, and either it's going to be him or it's going to be somebody even worse than him.
So, should I turn around and close my eyes? Depends. Did you do it? You really asking if I killed your son?
You're really asking if I'd kill my brother?
There's so much darkness in this world, and there's so much animosity and violence and hatred, and Tyrion and Jaime's relationship is actually something kind of sweet, you know, and Jaime has always defended his little brother when no one else would. And Jaime's the only one who has given him a chance. And so Tyrion has always clung to that. He really needs his brother. And, you know, it's hard for Jaime to go see him there because Jaime knows that things really don't look good for Tyrion.
The scene is sort of heartbreaking because from Tyrion's point of view, he starts to see that Jaime, in spite of everything, and you know, what we know, and he doesn't, in spite of the way that Cersei's been treating him and what's been going on between them, Jaime is still observing some sense of decorum and propriety and doing what's expected of him as a member of the Kingsguard by not just freeing his brother off the bat. But that would mean everyone would know he did it. It would mean giving up everything. It would mean giving up Cersei.
You know, Jaime doesn't like these situations where he's not able to sway things to his satisfaction, and he finds himself more and more impotent, you know, in terms of He's not able to fight because he's lost his right hand. He's not able to protect his brother in the way he once did. He's not able to be with his sister in the way he once was because she keeps rejecting him. And this is really hard for him.
And in Tyrion, I think it's a very sad scene in many ways. This is the person that he loves more than anyone in the world, his only real friend in the world. And he sees that his brother either can't or won't take a drastic action on his behalf. So he sort of leaves the scene right where he started it, in a jail cell, awaiting a show trial.
The poison. I don't understand. The Lannisters gave you wealth, power. Joffrey made you the Lord of Harrenhal.
A man with no motive is a man no one suspects.
I think Littlefinger kind of revels in telling people how he sees the world, and schooling Sansa. I think that's been important for him since the first time he met her, and he's been a bit obsessed with her from the get-go. In large part because she's the daughter of the woman he loved since he was a child. The way he sees it, he's has a chance to at least be close in some way. We're not quite sure what way he wants to be close yet with Sansa. And part of Littlefinger's version of intimacy is educating this young naif from the provinces on the way the world really works.
I think the only time that Littlefinger, as in the past, has ever been honest with anyone is when that person has absolutely no power. And Sansa is completely under his power. So he tells her the truth in one way, and she, I think very impressively, calls him on his bullshit.
I don't believe you. If they catch you, they'll put your head on a spike just like my father's. You'd risk that just to confuse them.
It doesn't make any sense. You don't get as far as Littlefinger's gotten if you take massive, drastic risks for no reason. And so Littlefinger peels that layer of kind of falsehood away and tells her something that's more true. Whether or not it's the real truth for him, it's hard to know. I mean, it's kind of uncertain whether or not there is anything underneath the lies except for better lies. But I think that what he tells Sansa definitely makes a lot more sense than his whole routine about shaking things up because he likes things to stay shaken up. He takes calculated, extreme risks, and he's smart enough and manipulative enough to make them pay off, or at least he has been so far.
I'd risk everything to get what I want.
And what do you want?
Everything.
The White Walkers are obviously this threat that's looming over the whole world of the show, whether or not anybody knows it. We know it. And we wanted to delve deeper into their world, but we wanted to do it in a sort of a specific way. I mean, having grown up as a kid watching some of the old monster movies, you realize that the most effective, mysterious, horrible things were the ones that remained mysterious, that the more you showed of something, the less mysterious and horrible and the more sort of mundane it started to seem. So we really wanted to just take people very deep into their world, but in a way that preserved the fundamental mystery of that world.
Part of it was something we were always curious about. When the very first time we saw Craster leave a baby in season 2, you're wondering, what the hell's that all about? You see the White Walker take it, you don't know what's gonna happen. Are the White Walkers gonna eat the babies? Are they gonna sacrifice them in some kind of ritual? What happens? We loved the idea that there was one last baby that Craster had fathered before he died. And it's a moment that's, while not in the books, is kind of suggested by the books, and a moment that we thought would be really fun to illustrate in a horrifying way. And it was actually pretty horrifying. I mean, it's the kind of thing that, the best, with all the effects, we have great prosthetics and great visual effects and everything else, but the best effect in this case is a real live baby that's, actually unhappy because it's not with his mom.
And the baby is really the point of view in the scene. I mean, the baby's the one we're worried about. He's the one that we care about, whose fate we care about. And so we all kind of centered around the idea of making it as disoriented and as claustrophobic as that baby's very limited point of view. And the revelation of what the Walkers are actually doing with the babies, we hope will come as a particularly nasty surprise to people.
I will not let those I have freed slide back into chains. I will not sail for Westeros.
What then?
I will do what queens do. I will rule
This scene shows Dany learning a lesson that I think all revolutionaries learned at one point or another, which is that conquering in many ways is a whole lot easier than ruling.
This is a pivotal moment for Daenerys because for so long her sole goal was getting back to Westeros, conquering Westeros, sitting on the Iron Throne, and becoming the queen that she believes she has every right to be. And now she has the opportunity.
She's driven by a kind of a deep empathy, a much deeper empathy than probably anybody else in the show. It's something that makes her as charismatic as she is to people because they can sense the sincerity of it. Her empathy allows her to look at the people of Westeros and say, why the hell would they ever follow me? If I hadn't proven myself through my actions to be somebody worth following, why would they let me rule if I hadn't proven myself to be somebody who has ruled well somewhere else?
If he sees you, he won't let you go north. He's my brother.
Bran is on a quest right now, and he's risking his life, and he's thrown everything else aside to pursue this quest because he believes, based on the visions that he's seen and based on what Jojen has told him, that his destiny depends on getting to the Three-Eyed Raven. He's faced with a really difficult choice in this moment because he sees his beloved half-brother Jon.
In the abstract, Bran's whole choice over last season was between letting go of his past and grabbing onto a very uncertain future. When you actually see that embodiment of your past, when your brother is within eyeshot and within earshot if you would only yell loud enough, I think that it's a much more stark instance of the choice that he has to make.
He has to really go against all his instincts, not to shout out for Jon Snow and to go, you know, deeper into the woods and find that Three-Eyed Raven.
You want to stay here? In Craster's Keep?
Burn it to the ground.
Burning Craster's Keep symbolizes Jon's desire to bring the Night's Watch back to some semblance of what it used to be and have it actually stand for something and have it actually, you know, as far as protecting the realms of men from the actions of evil men and evil things in general, I think that Craster's Keep was a pretty good horror show embodiment of everything that can go wrong with human beings, and burning it down is telling anybody who cares to listen that there are certain things that Jon definitely will stand against and will put his money where his mouth is when it comes to opposing.
Welcome to the Iron Bank.
From the moment we read about the Iron Bank in the books, we loved it because it was such an atypical element of a fantasy world. Banking, it doesn't really factor into most high fantasy, but it was so well drawn and felt like it grounded the world in such a historical kind of a zone that we were really excited to get to it.
The Iron Bank plays an important part in this conflict, but it's almost always behind the scenes. So we've heard Tywin Lannister talking about it, for instance, how much the Crown is in debt to the Iron Bank, and we've heard others refer to it, but we haven't seen it yet. And so it was important for us to finally get a sense of what this institution is all about, and it's really, at its heart, heartless. I mean, it's purely about lending money and getting money returned with interest, and if you fail to repay your loan, they'll figure out a way to get their money back, and they always do. And Stannis is desperate for gold at this point because he suffered a terrible defeat at Blackwater, lost pretty much his entire navy, all but I think 32 ships, much of his army, and much of his support. And finally, Davos has a plan for how they can regroup. But before they can do that, they have to somehow convince these bankers who are completely cold-blooded and aren't interested in any kind of emotional arguments why Stannis is the man to bet on.
And Davos really understands what it is that makes the Iron Bank tick. He knows how to hit the nerve that's going to make them give Stannis the money, because he has a very good point that Tywin Lannister is sort of the bulwark of the Lannister power that they've chosen to back, and he's older, and once he is gone, the Lannisters become a much less enticing investment for the Iron Bank of Braavos, and Stannis starts to look much better in comparison.
He's a tried and tested battle commander, and he doesn't just talk about paying people back, he does it.
We're going home. It's all right. It's me, Yara.
You can't trick me.
I'm not tricking you, Theon. I'm saving
Not
you.
Theon. Reek. Here, Reek. My name is Reek.
I think it's probably a surprise for both Yara and Theon/Reek when they first see each other. Yara knows that her brother's been tortured. I mean, she got that box last season. She knows that Theon's favorite toy was taken from him, so she's expecting to find someone who's been damaged, but I don't think she knew quite how far he'd sunk. He suffered so much trauma at the hands of Ramsay that his identity has been submerged, maybe drowned, and replaced with this character Reek, who's just a castrated, terrified servant who will do anything his master asks. And Theon/Reek doesn't want to admit that he even recognizes her, because to admit that would be to admit that he's Theon, which means rebelling against his master, which means he'll be tortured more. And really everything that he does at this point is pain avoidance. You know, it's just trying to keep away from that crucifix that he was on for all of season 3 and just survive and do everything his master says. So when he sees her and she's trying to get him to flee with him, all he can think is, how can I stop this? How can I be loyal to my master? And she, you know, for such a proud man and for such a proud family, this is kind of a shocking development, and she can't really believe it at first, but ultimately he's truly dead to her.
I'll leave the King's Guard. I'll take my place as your son and heir if you let Tyrion live. Done.
The thing that we always liked about the scene is that Jaime has decided, here's something I can do to help my brother, and it's a huge sacrifice for him because he doesn't want to leave King's Landing. He doesn't want to go back to Casterly Rock. He has no interest in being the future lord of Casterly Rock. He wants to stay in King's Landing because that means staying with Cersei, and Cersei's the one he loves. But he's willing to give up all of that to save his brother. So for him, it's quite a painful ask, and he's a little shocked because Tywin's ready for it. I mean, Tywin's been expecting this from the beginning, and you sort of realize when Tywin responds immediately that this has been a long-term plan. You know, this is probably ever since Tyrion was arrested. Tywin never fails to take advantage of a crisis, and that's what he's doing right here, and sees this as a way of consolidating Lannister power, getting what he wants from Jaime after Jaime had refused him before, and getting rid of Tyrion all in one fell swoop. So it's a win-win for Tywin.
It's a drama within the Lannister household. So the big standoff between Tyrion and Tywin is obvious, but there are also key players in a scene, Jaime and Cersei, obviously, and we know what's happening there. And there's this wonderful tug of push-pull that's happening all the time within those 4 points of contention, if you will. So it was very important for us to be able to constantly bounce ball off of these characters and see what reactions they produce.
The imp rounded on him. He slapped the king across the face and called him a vicious idiot and a fool.
I think if Tyrion has a tragic flaw, it may be that he sometimes lets his distastes for hypocrisy and stupidity get in the way of his good sense. And it's been fun to watch him sometimes literally smack Joffrey down. But in this trial, the chickens have come home to roost on a lot of that behavior, and they've provided a lot of ammunition for Cersei to ground the evidence against him in reality for the most part.
After we received word of Robb Stark's death, he didn't seem gladdened by the news. Perhaps his marriage to Sansa Stark had made him more sympathetic to the Northern cause.
Tyrion is clearly more wounded by Varys' testimony than by the testimony of anybody that precedes Varys, but on some level, he has to admit that Varys told him explicitly that if push came to shove, he was not going to sacrifice his life needlessly for Tyrion. So I think Tyrion is wounded, and you can tell the fact that he chooses to ask Varys a question and doesn't even bother cross-examining anyone else. He doesn't really expect that he's going to get the better of Varys in that situation. I think he wants Varys to feel bad.
Crown may call its next witness.
Shay. Please don't.
I am a whore. Remember?
The Shay testimony is really what puts him over the edge. It pushes him into the kind of immoderate, passionate behavior that he occasionally veers into.
I will not give my life for Joffrey's murder, and I know I'll get no justice here. I demand a trial by combat.
There's a big standoff, Tywin makes a grand stand, and Tyrion will not have any of it. Basically, he defies his father and staring him right in the eyes and say that I'm not going to fall victim. I'm going to defend myself any way I can, and the only way he knows how, historically, is by combat.
He threatens Tywin with the one ace up his sleeve. If Tyrion dies and Jaime is a Kingsguard, then Tywin's direct family line disappears, especially since he knows that the trial by combat is going to be an unlikely thing for him to survive.
Very well. Do what you do best. Take off your clothes.
In season 1, Dany's sexuality was central to her transformation from basically a piece of property into a full-fledged human being. I mean, with Drogo, the first thing that she took charge of was the only thing that was available to her at the time, which was her own body. And she came into her own as an adult, really, amongst the Dothraki, who are not shy about their bodies in any way. Dany's not really cut out to be a virgin queen. And Daario is a bad boy who seems like a good idea to her at this moment. And she takes her prerogatives as a powerful person, as powerful people sometimes do. He's made himself more than available. She didn't ever expect Jorah to find out. She loves Jorah in her own way. She makes it very clear to him that he's far more important to her and means far more to her than a person like Daario ever could, just not in the way that Jorah might like.
He's been in love with Dany from pretty much her wedding day. And now he sees this young upstart who just entered her life relatively recently come into his world and sweep her off her feet. I think he's both incredibly jealous and also a little bit angry at Dany that she would fall for a man who he considers so unworthy of her.
We met, you and I, many years ago.
I think I would have remembered that.
Unlikely, you had just been born.
Oberyn telling Tyrion the story about seeing him as a baby when he'd been told that he was a monster and he realized that he wasn't a monster, he was just a baby. I mean, there's a real tendency to demonize your enemies. He has empathy for Tyrion, and this is an implicit way of recognizing that Tyrion isn't a monster and that he's a human being that has perhaps more in common with Oberyn than either of them would have thought. Oberyn owes Tyrion a great deal. Oberyn came to King's Landing to seek justice against those who had wronged him, and by demanding a trial by combat, Tyrion has given Oberyn a perfect opportunity to achieve what Oberyn set out to achieve, which is ticking one of the big names off of his list of people who need killing.
I will be your champion.
Littlefinger, as we know, was in love with Sansa's mother. From the time he was a little boy, he was in love with Catelyn. He sees in Sansa, it's almost like it's Catelyn reborn, but even more beautiful.
You're more beautiful than she ever was.
Lord Baelish.
Call me Peter.
You get the sense that he's wanted this for a long time, of this kiss, and he finally allows himself that pleasure and kind of shocks Sansa, and obviously was not aware that Lysa might be somewhere within eyeshot.
You don't understand.
I saw you! You can't lie to me because I saw it with my own eyes.
He kissed me. I pulled away.
Liar! He is mine! My father, my husband, my sister, they all stood between us and now they're all dead. That's what happens to people who stand between Peter and me.
Well, something that becomes clear in the 5th episode that's reiterated here in this much more emotionally volatile scene is that Lysa and Littlefinger are actually the people who set the entire story in motion. The story we've been watching for, I guess, 37 hours at this point. They've arguably had more influence on the events in this world than any other two people in the story. Sansa probably doesn't quite catch this in the moment, of course, because Lysa is threatening to throw her through the moon door by her hair.
Lysa's batshit crazy. She's prone to these tantrums. This one is actually justified. She's just married this guy, and she's been suspicious about this beautiful young woman. Even though it's her niece, she's still suspicious about Sansa because anytime she sees her husband with a much younger, prettier girl, she's gonna get jealous. All of her paranoia is validated when she sees Littlefinger kissing her. The only one who's really ever been able to calm her down from these furies has been Littlefinger, and it's partly because, you know, she's been in love with him forever, and they grew up together, and it's partly because he's really good. I mean, he's just a master manipulator. And so it plays out as if it's going to be another one of those times where no one else could have possibly taken her quite literally off the ledge there and saved Sansa, but he does it, and you kind of think like that's how it's going to end. And then there's that wonderful moment where he says,
I have only loved one woman. Only one. My entire life. Your sister.
We were told there was a witness, a girl.
A niece of yours, I believe.
Let me fetch her.
No need. We prefer to hear her testimony unadulterated.
Littlefinger thinks the jig is up. I mean, he's pretty sure that it's over for him, and you can see his face, and it's one of my favorite scenes in the season. He's not gonna be able to slither out of this one the way he has so many times before. He doesn't have powerful friends he can call on here, and ultimately it all comes down to the word of Sansa.
He's been teaching Sansa lessons for a long time now. He's been making grand statements to her about the nature of the world. I don't think it's ever occurred to him that she might be learning these lessons, taking these lessons on board. He's taught her for a long time how important it is to be a good liar. He tells her in episode 5 about knowing your strengths, use them wisely. And in episode 7, when he kisses her, he's teaching her a lesson about his own weakness and about her own strength relative to him, about how she can exercise control over him. And in this episode, she puts all those things together to show that she is indeed not a silly little girl who never learns, but she is a very smart girl who has learned a great deal from her teacher, enough that she can turn the tables on him and actually exercise real leverage over him.
Why did you help me?
If they'd have executed you, what would they have done with me?
It's basically a devil you know kind of situation where Sansa doesn't know these other people, and for all the creepiness of Littlefinger, he has protected her in some ways. You know, she's never come to serious harm with him, and she does feel like she knows his motives.
She reveals that she made a very Littlefinger-esque calculation about what was best for her, and when she tells him that she knows what he wants, it's a pretty bald statement of saying, I know where your raw nerve is. I have figured out what I am to you, the confusing mix of daughter and second chance at the woman you loved, and I am prepared to use that against you if necessary. I think she's probably the only person so far to ever really get the upper hand with Littlefinger. Littlefinger is always 3 steps ahead of everybody, but he's suddenly finds himself 1 step behind this girl who he'd written off as a stupid little girl who never learns.
Now tell me, what is your name?
Ramsi Snow.
No, not Ramsay Snow. From this day until your last day, you are Ramsay Bolton, son of Ruse Bolton, Warden of the North.
I think Roose is very pleasantly surprised that his bastard has turned out so well. Anything horrible that Ramsay has learned, he's learned from watching his father. I mean, Ramsay is a psychopath, and I don't think Roose qualifies as a psychopath, but they're both very extreme characters, even in the context of this pretty brutal world. And Ramsay has achieved, in Roose's eyes, tremendous things. He may have done them in an unorthodox manner, but most importantly, the way in which he used Theon to take Moat Cailin, which is a very important strategic position for Roose. Ramsay's proved himself to be a worthy successor, and I don't think Roose is all that worried about how Ramsay accomplishes the things he accomplishes. It's more the fact that he's accomplished them that's important to Roose. I love the way that Awan plays the moment. There's something where for a split second you almost feel yourself feeling for this person and how great it must feel for him to finally be recognized by his father, until you remember that he's a murderous sociopath.
Why did the usurper pardon you?
Who do you think sent this to Marine? Who profits? This is the work of Tywin Lannister. He wants to divide us. If we're fighting each other, we're not fighting him.
The pardon was signed the year we met.
It's hard to keep a thing like that covered up forever, especially when your enemies are so invested in putting a wedge between you. I mean, they're a good team. They complement each other nicely in lots of ways that are really troublesome to the Lannisters especially. So it shouldn't be a surprise. I think it's just one of those things that in hindsight he probably should have told her a long time ago, and it's more the fact that he kept it from her than the fact that he did it, which seals his fate. I think from Dany's perspective, this is the most earth-shattering thing that could possibly happen to her. He's her rock and her anchor. The way in which he stops her from flying off into potentially dangerous directions. And when someone that important to you, that central to you, is shown to be not just a liar, but when their entire relationship to you is shown to be based upon a lie, I think it poisons every corner of her world with doubt and mistrust. From his perspective, he may have started as an informer, but she is his whole reason for being at this point. I mean, he's completely given up on his desire to return to Westeros in any way except by her side. His home now is wherever she happens to be. So this is really like being expelled from the garden for him. This is the worst thing that could happen to either of them.
You told them I was carrying Drogo's child?
Aye.
Yes or no? Don't call me that. Did you tell them I was carrying Drogo's child?
For her, it's her child. When Viserys put her child in danger and pointed the sword at her stomach, you saw a switch flip in her. You saw something change. And she watched him die without blinking an eye, even though he was her brother and the only family she'd ever known. And when she realizes that Jorah was also responsible for putting that child in danger, I think that's what closes the door on him forever.
Do you remember Cousin Orson Lannister? Of course. Wet nurse dropped him on his head and left him simple. Simple? Used to sit all day in the garden, crushing beetles with a rock. Why did he do it? What was it all about?
I think Tyrion is faced with the imminence of his own likely end. He's with his brother, and in a situation like this, his thoughts naturally go to their shared experience, to happier times, maybe not happy times as such, but much happier than the situation that he's in now. And when he goes into his own past, his thoughts are going to go naturally to memories that resonate with his current situation. The memories that resonate with the questions he's probably asking himself right now. Why? Why is this happening to me? Is there any reason? Is there any meaning behind the situation that I find myself in? I think that even if in his heart of hearts he probably thinks the answer is no, it would be really great to hear someone that he loves tell him otherwise. I think there's definitely a grasping quality to his story. Peter and Nikolai both did such a fantastic job with it that you really feel the bond between these two brothers having what may well be the last conversation they ever have.
Looks like very light armor.
I like to move around.
You could at least wear a helmet. You shouldn't drink before a fight.
I always drink before a fight.
What's really fascinating to me about Oberyn is he always does what he wants to do when he wants to do it, which sounds normal, but I don't think anyone really lives their life like that, or no sane people really do, because you'd get arrested or you'd get shot, you know. I mean, your life would be very, very short if you really did that. But Oberyn has no compromises, and on the one hand it makes him a very admirable kind of magnetic personality, because I think we all tend to have envy for someone who's that free and who's that courageous. You know, he never lets fear stop him from doing anything. On the other hand, as admirable as that might be, it's also really fucking dangerous, and it gets him in trouble, and you know, he chose the exact wrong time to do it. And it's not just killing the Mountain that's important to him, because Oberyn always viewed the Mountain as just a pawn, a very large pawn, but he's Tywin Lannister's soldier, you know. And so if the Mountain committed an atrocity, it was with Tywin's, at least his permission and possibly his direct command. And so for him, the Mountain, ironically, is the little fish, and the big fish is Tywin. He really wants to prove that Tywin was behind all this. And so he wants the mountain to confess his guilt in front of Tywin, in front of all the lords and ladies of King's Landing, and that's the victory he's after, not just killing the mountain. And he's so close to getting that, or he feels like he's so close, but he gets a little bit careless. And you know, any other man in this position is down on his back, he's been speared through the gut, he's poisoned, you know, it would be fine, but the mountain is not like normal people. You know, he's freakishly strong and kind of refuses to die in this moment, and so Oberyn gets a little bit careless and makes a fatal mistake.
Episode 409 is similar to episode 209, the Blackwater episode, in that it's contained to one location, one night. That said, it's much more involved than Blackwater was.
After we saw how well Blackwater had come out, we thought it would be great to get Neil Marshall back when we eventually have the battle at the wall. The whole episode, not the whole episode, but I guess 15 minutes into it, it becomes a battle, and it's easy to get a little bit monotonous if it's just guys charging at each other for 45 minutes straight. And so part of the challenge is trying to find these little moments that will stand out on their own, and the big challenge is just finding time to do everything, because there's so many action beats that you want, and the action beats are always the slowest to get right, or take the most time intensive, and it was all night shoots like Blackwater. So there's certainly some similarities.
Our vows never specifically forbid intimate relations with women. What? I shall take no wife. Yes, that's in there. There's no denying that. I shall father no children. It's very specific. But what our vows have to say about other activities is open to interpretation.
Sam is a very literary fellow, and he's given a lot of attention to the vows, and he's not quite sure that the vows mean what everyone interprets them to mean, because after all, there's nothing specific in the vows that says you can't lie with the woman. It just says, you know, you can't father any children. But there's also a bit of hypocrisy to it, because Brothers of the Night's Watch have been going to the Molestown brothel forever, and that's why there is a Molestown brothel. From Sam's point of view, he's in love with this girl Gilly, and what's wrong with that? As long as he continues to maintain his vows, as they're literally stated, then he's not actually betraying the Night's Watch. John's not quite so sure that anyone sees it that way, and as he says, I don't think Sir Alistair was really much for interpretation. It's just fun to see those two guys together, you know, whenever possible. It's kind of the quiet before the storm scene, and there are a few of those scenes that we really love.
I am a man of the Night's Watch, Gilly. I made a promise to defend the wall, and I have to keep it. Because that's what men do.
There is a sort of native sense of honor to him, not necessarily in the Jon Snow heroic mode. Sam is absolutely petrified, but he knows he has to do that, and as he says, you know, this is, I've made an oath, and this is what men do, and he's not going to betray his brothers by staying down there and avoiding the fight.
They held the gate.
This episode is a regular slaughterhouse where, we're killing off a few favorites. Gren goes out again with great heroism. Him and his small party face off against a giant. Although they lose, they do kill the giant as well, so they do save the day and protect the gateway to Castle Black and the south. They do a very noble deed.
This battle is one that we've been planning for a long time, and we have these actors that we love, Joseph Alton as Pip and Mark Stanley as Gren, and while neither of the characters die in the books, it felt like we had to have some casualties amongst the people that we really care about here. We decided it should be Gren, because Gren's someone we've seen from quite nearly the very beginning of the series, and he's always been around. He's quite loyal and steadfast. We knew that people would care about him, you know, down there. And it's a great scene, and we love seeing him really take command in his final moments and stir his comrades to courage, you know, reciting their vows, and the tunnel scene worked out beautifully.
I pledge my life and honor to the Night's Watch for this night and all the nights to come! Archers! Knock your arrows! Knock arrows!
John, as well, has to go through some major heartbreak, but at the same time, he's stepping up to leadership when it's needed. When things are at their worst, people are at their best, and he certainly steps up to the cause.
You have the wall!
Obviously, Kit's the center of this episode. He's the centerpiece of the episode. Watching him assume the mantle of authority without particularly wanting to assume the mantle of authority. There was one scene I remember watching, and we said, rewind. There's somebody put over that weird speed up, you know, like a speed ramp on Kit's sword move there, and it looks fake, it looks too fast. Could we fix whatever somebody did to that shot? And Chris, the visual effects editor, looked at it and he said, there's no speed ramp on this shot. Like, that's the speed at which he's moving with this big, heavy aluminum sword. It's very rare to find somebody who both has the acting chops that Kit has and the ability to say so much in such a subtle way. He's an action hero. When Ygritte sees Jon, who she's talked about killing many, many times over the course of this season, she hesitates.
It harks back to the first episode of the season where Tormund says, I've seen you slip a shaft through a rabbit's eye or fawn's eye from 400 yards. She's kind of a prodigy with the bow, and she had a fairly close shot at Jon Snow at the end of season 3. As much as she feels betrayed by Jon and as much fury as she feels, there's also real love there. She has the opportunity here in the courtyard, and she doesn't take it.
Obviously, we have a major moment in this episode with the loss of Ygritte. So we did the kind of build up to it, but I knew I didn't want to get into that particular scene until, it needed to be fresh. It needed a new day to get into that, because it's going to be emotional, it's going to be tough.
Rose Leslie is such a wonderful actress. From the first time we saw her, I was watching a Downton Abbey episode and watching this actress and thinking, she'd be a really good Ygritte. And then to see that final shot, which we told Neil Marshall, one of our favorite shots of the series, and we very, very rarely do slow motion. We don't like slow motion. It tends to feel self-conscious to us and a little bit cheesy, but this one shot we loved so much, there was no way, when we saw it in the director's cut, that Neil had put it in slow. We loved it.
The shot of Jon cradling Ygritte in his arms is my favorite shot of the episode. It just completely brings you into Jon's consciousness, and you're experiencing this moment as he's experiencing it as something, the worst thing that could possibly happen, stretched out over time longer than you could ever imagine. And it's beautiful and heartbreaking.
Do you remember that, Kay? We should have stayed in that cave.
I think the idea that Ygritte is gone from the world is almost as difficult for Jon as the idea that Rose Leslie is no longer on the show is difficult for us.
We'll go back there. You know nothing, Jon Snow.
What's a man of the Night's Watch doing in a wildling camp?
My name is Jon Snow, Your Grace. I'm Ned Stark's son.
This is a world where bloodlines mean everything, and particularly for Stannis, whose whole claim on the throne is based on the fact that he is the rightful heir. He is the true blood relation to Robert Baratheon, his older brother, and now he's meeting a young man who, while a bastard, is still descended from Ned Stark. And Ned was the one who informed Stannis about his rightful claim to the throne, and so Stannis has a lot of respect for the memory of Ned, and so he has respect for Ned's family.
Stannis is a person who takes obligations very seriously, and he has a debt to Ned Stark, and Ned Stark died for Stannis's birthright, and I think he'll never forget that, and it definitely factors into his decision to take Jon seriously.
We were right there in front of you and you didn't see us. One look in the past 20 years. One real look at your own children and you would have known.
Known what?
It's a huge gamble on Cersei's part. You need to be steely and tough as hell to pull a move like this on a person like Tywin. She goes up against him and she wins. And she wins with the one thing that she holds over him, which is his family legacy. She has a piece of information that could destroy the most important thing in the world to him, the thing that he's worked on his entire life. And I think that Tywin looks in her eyes, and when she tells him the truth, he realizes that she is someone who will do exactly what she claims she'll do. She's very much her father's daughter in that way. ruling is about maintaining order and creating an environment for your people that is safe. And her dragons, which were such an asset in scaring the shit out of everybody and making people throw down their swords and run in the other direction, when she would come knocking as a conqueror, they're becoming a liability that she can't afford anymore. It's one thing to be killing people's goats, and you can pay off a goat herder for his goats. You can't pay off a goat herder for his children. So she realizes that she has to put the interests of her people ahead of her dragons, who are the only real children she's ever going to have.
You're Arya Stark.
Arya's really impressed by her up until the moment where Brienne figures out who she is. And then Arya gets really suspicious because her travels over the last few years have taught her to be quite suspicious of strangers, even strangers who might appear friendly at first. And the fact that Brienne admits her association with Jaime Lannister, and as the Hound points out, Brienne's carrying a Lannister sword. You know, Arya has no idea that's the Valyrian steel that was melted down from ice. It's just, she knows it's Lannister gold because the Hound says it is, and Brienne doesn't deny it. So all of a sudden, this woman who Arya was quite taken with seems to be an agent of the Lannisters, and Arya doesn't want any part of her.
Brienne's really caught unawares here. I don't know if she's thinking too far into the future about what she's going to do with this little girl once she gets her hands on her. But I think that right now, her sole concern is saving this girl from the Hound. She obviously doesn't believe that the Hound is protecting Arya, somewhat tragically, because by the time we get to this point in the story, the Hound is protecting Arya. When he says he's looking after her, by the time he says that, he actually means it.
Go on. Do it. Do it.
Arya is in some ways the product of this education where the Hound's, you know, telling her you're very soft and you've always been soft, and if you're gonna stay soft, you're not gonna survive. And look at all your soft, stark relatives who died for being soft-hearted or whatever. And Arya's not anymore. You know, she's become quite tough. And as much as there's been a growing, you know, closeness between her and the Hound at some points in the season, she's never forgotten what the Hound has done, and the Hound was on her list. And so the Hound now wants something very badly from her, and she's not going to give it to him, you know, and it's kind of a brutal moment because you kind of so want Arya to give him mercy, you know, just to be kind of sweet there, but that sweetness is gone if it was ever there. And partly the reason for that is because of the Hound himself, and she gets her revenge finally for, you know, the murder of her friend.
Kill me!
Tyrion definitely has impulsive tendencies, especially when it comes to his father. I think he just thinks about what kind of a father Tywin has been to him, and the fact that Tywin was willing to have him executed for something that he knows Tywin knows he didn't do. I think at the end of the day, he just decided it was time for Tywin to be called to task for the way he'd behaved towards his son for the past 40-odd years.
Tyrion is coming to deal with his father and had no idea he was going to run into Shae, and it's heartbreaking for him, especially hearing her say "my lion," which was always what Shae called Tyrion, and hearing it and realizing it's meant for Tywin, not Tyrion, is a shock and kind of the final betrayal that just makes Tyrion snap in this moment.
As horrible as everything has been, that's, in a way, the most horrible thing he could possibly see, because she wasn't a whore. By the time they have become committed to each other, she's no longer a whore. When he calls her a whore, it's not that he believes this is what she is, it's what he desperately needs to tell her to save her life in his mind. And ironically, he's ended up turning her into that very thing that she was running from. So the fact that she would betray him with his father in that way, I just think something breaks in him.
It's kind of the tragedy of these two people who genuinely loved each other and who both felt betrayed by one another and end up trying to kill each other.
Tyrion,
crossbow.
You know, one of the great things about Tywin, one of the reasons he is so good at what he does, is he's the master poker player, and part of that means never showing shock. And if you're gonna be the master of the situation, you can't admit that you are stunned by the turn of events. And so I think he's definitely surprised, but Tywin is Tywin, and he very quickly tries to manipulate the situation again and tell Tyrion, I was never going to let them execute you, you're my son. And I think he's quite convinced that he'll be able to talk his way out of this one. In this game that so many of the characters are playing, no one's played it better than Tywin. And he doesn't believe that this can be the end. It's not going to end like this. Tywin Lannister does not die sitting on the toilet, you know, murdered by his own son. And he's kind of shocked right up until the moment the first bolt hits him. And then even more shocked because he can't believe that this is how it's going to end.
It's all of Tywin's shortcomings as a person and a father coming together in a perfect storm in this moment to fatal effect.
This whole season's about learning hard lessons from your ruthless elders, and Tyrion learned that lesson. This is a man who's been trying to eliminate him really from the time he was born, and Tyrion gets his revenge.
What have you done?